Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's just dive right in. Because today we are exploring the ultimate technological frontier. We're looking at a future, well, honestly, a future that's rapidly becoming our present, where humanity is using artificial intelligence to write the actual software of life. And the goal? Cleaning up the planet and completely revolutionizing human health. We are talking about the solar-punk biotech revolution.
So ask yourself, what actually happens when we can engineer the building blocks of life as easily as writing computer code? To wrap our heads around this, we have to talk about a concept known as the daily forklift. For decades, we kind of thought AI would just be a fancy chatbot. But according to the Sovereign Tech audit, its real superpower is acting as a cognitive forklift. It lifts our incredibly heavy routine cognitive load so human minds can focus on something much, much bigger: macromolecular orchestration. Basically, instead of pushing paperwork, we're orchestrating the very molecules that make up life itself.
All right, let's move to Section 1, illuminating the dark proteome. From observation to engineering.
Biology is undergoing this massive fundamental shift. It's moving from a purely observational science, where we just, look at things under a microscope, into a highly predictive, engineering-driven discipline. And it really all starts with this massive number right here, over 200 million. That is the number of mapped protein structures currently sitting in the AlphaFold database, democratized for global research. Before AI, mapping proteins was unbelievably difficult. We had this thing called the dark proteome, which was the vast majority of proteins whose structures were just completely unknown to us. By predicting these structures with AI, we have quite literally illuminated that dark proteome. It's like we finally have the picture on the front of a billion-piece biological puzzle.
And the speed of this evolution? It's just staggering. In 2018, AlphaFold 1 proved that deep learning could actually predict inter-residue distances. Fast forward just 2 years to 2020, and AlphaFold 2 introduces the evoformer, solving single-chain protein folding with near-experimental accuracy. But the real game changer? That's the leap to AlphaFold 3 in 2024. It uses a brand new pairformer architecture combined with generative diffusion models. So what does that mean practically for us? It means it doesn't just guess basic shapes anymore. It predicts the exact atomic coordinates of incredibly complex, multimolecular assemblies. We're talking proteins interacting with DNA, RNA, and small molecules, all at the exact same time, the whole shebang.
Now look at this before and after comparison. We went from having over 5,000 unsolved human proteins down to just 29. No way, right? The dark proteome shrank from 26% of our structural coverage to a mere 10%. But perhaps the most staggering part is that bottom row. The time required for cancer target chemical screening dropped from literally years of tedious lab work to a 70% reduction in time. We are talking about shaving years off the development of life-saving therapeutics.
Which brings us to Section 2, designing solar-punk biology, engineering solutions for climate and health. This right here is the absolute core of the solar-punk biotech vision. Because, you see, we aren't just looking at these proteins anymore. We are actively designing them to engineer real-world solutions for both our climate and our health. Thanks to AlphaFold 3, the routine design of completely novel proteins is becoming an everyday reality. We are talking about creating lab-grown, AI-designed enzymes that can actively gobble up and solve real-world pollution. We're designing clean biofuels that don't rely on extracting fossil fuels. We're creating sustainable eco-materials. And we're achieving rapid pandemic preparedness by quickly mapping exactly how viruses interact with human cells. There is this profound, rapidly growing synergy between AI and systems biology, and it's helping us literally engineer our way out of climate and health crises. I absolutely love this quote from the Sovereign Tech audit because it perfectly grounds everything we've just been talking about. The transition of molecular biology from an observational science to a predictive, engineering-driven discipline is anchored by the evolution of the AlphaFold architecture. Meaning, designing novel proteins to heal the world, that isn't science fiction anymore. Because of this AI architecture, it's becoming a daily, routine reality. But, there's always a catch, and it's a big one. Section 3, the AI energy bottleneck, the physical limits of cognitive capital. Up until now, we've been talking about the infinite scalability of microscopic biology, but now we have to face some very strict thermodynamic realities. We're looking at a massive clash. On one side, we have cognitive capital, the infinite scalability of AI protein design and these autonomous agentic workflows. But on the other side, we have physical resources, the strict thermodynamic constraints of our power grids. What we're watching unfold right now is a textbook case of Jevons paradox. Economics tells us that as a technology becomes more efficient, we don't actually use less of it. We use way, way more. So as AI models get cheaper and more efficient, the demand for agentic compute absolutely skyrockets. And that infinite cognitive demand is violently clashing with the finite physical constraints of our electrical grid.
And this clash has intense real-world consequences. Get this, terrestrial data centers could consume up to 12% of the entire U.S. power grid by 2028. That's enough to completely reshape our infrastructure. It's an almost unbelievable projection. The massive energy and water requirements needed to run this new agentic era are putting an unbearable strain on local municipal energy and water resources. We simply cannot build traditional power plants fast enough to keep up with the daily forklift of AI.
So how do we solve this? Let's get into Section 4. Off-grid sustainable compute, building planetary solarpunk infrastructure. If we can't power this solarpunk biotech revolution on our current grid, we have to zoom all the way out to the macroscopic planetary level and start building off-grid eco-integrated environments. Notice the massive difference in resource usage here. Traditional terrestrial data centers consume about 9 liters of water just to evaporate and cool every single kilowatt-hour of compute. Compare that to Microsoft's Project Natick, where they dropped subsea server pods right onto the ocean floor. Their water footprint? Literally 0 liters. They just use the natural thermal environment of the ocean to cool the servers in a completely closed loop.
But you're probably wondering, does it actually work better? Comparing the metrics, a typical land data center has a power usage efficiency, or PUE, of about 1.55. The subsea data center operates at an incredibly efficient 1.07. But the real shocker for me is the reliability. Because you're removing oxygen and humidity and operating in this pristine, dry nitrogen environment under the sea, Project Natick yielded an 8-fold decrease in server failure rates. Actually, think about that. It's not just more sustainable. The hardware actually performs 8 times better. And the ocean isn't our only off-grid frontier. We're seeing Arctic closed-loop thermal exchanges being built. In places like Finland, telecom operators are taking the waste heat generated by these massive AI servers and routing it directly into municipal district heating networks. The exhaust heat from training AI models is literally being used to warm local homes, greenhouses, and even fish farms. And in places where it isn't freezing cold, engineers are using geothermal cold underground thermal energy storage to sink that heat deep into the earth, all while drawing continuous 24/7 geothermal power back out.
Okay, but what if we leave the Earth entirely? This brings us to the ultimate off-grid frontier, orbital AI. But space has a major problem called the physics wall. We often think of space as being freezing cold, but the vacuum of space actually acts as a near-perfect insulator. Without air, you can't just use simple convective fans to cool a server. It is incredibly difficult to radiate AI server heat away when you are trapped inside a vacuum.
So how in the world do we bypass the space physics wall? Well, engineers are developing some truly futuristic solar-punk hardware infrastructure to handle it. First, instead of one giant overheating server block, they deploy modular satellite swarms, nicknamed silver dragonflies, so the heat is widely distributed. Second, they connect these floating compute nodes at light speed via laser optical links. And third, and I gotta say, this is definitely my favorite part, they are looking at placing server farms inside subterranean lunar lava tubes. They'd use the massive thermal weight of the literal moon itself as a natural heat sink.
Which leaves us with this final drop-the-mic kind of question to consider. How will you adapt to an economy where biology itself is programmable and our infrastructure operates completely off the grid? Because we are rapidly moving into a highly synergistic, incredibly sustainable future. A future where AI helps us design the very enzymes that heal our planet, all powered by data centers resting silently in ocean trenches and lunar caves. The future is wild, and it's being built right now. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time as we continue to unpack the world's most fascinating source material.